What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and today I want to look into how certain players are working to change beloved properties into DEI-infested hellscapes. From Warhammer not being gay enough, an investment firm buying their way into Japanese manga, and companies vowing to modern audience their franchises, what's going on exactly? Firstly, Warhammer. There were these articles I've been holding on to that proves that these franchises can have diverse representation without it being hand-fisted or terrible. But regardless of giving people what they want, they simply decide against it. Firstly, from thegamer.com, please shut up about 40K's female custodies. This article was from a bit back, and it's pretty much this journalist telling everyone to accept female custodies within Warhammer, because there's nothing wrong with it according to them. They drop the usual defense tactics like the official Warhammer account confirming that female custodies always existed. And they also recite the lore part of the book that pissed everyone off a few months back, which confirmed that custodies were in fact always female all of a sudden. As you already know, this sort of rhetoric has caused uproars and lots of discussion. But it's this one part here in the Gamer's article that kind of sparked this entire video, which is where they say this. Taken literally, this means that the very first custodian was a woman, and those that followed were a mix of different genders. However, I suspect that Warhammer means that there were female custodians among the first 10,000. Either way, it's a big retcon that some people are very mad about. The same quote as always is thrown around, which says that custodians are made from the sons of nobles. But none of these people know why the lore, up until this point, has been male-centric. So now the way that it's interpreted from the new lore books is that we went from having no female custodies to suddenly there have always been female custodies to now suggesting, did you actually know that the very first Adeptus Custodes was a woman all along? Of course, these changes are insane, and not for any good reason. It does nothing but anger the loyal fan base and cause them to react the way they should, because this is obviously ridiculous. This is what I call cultural revisionism. Sure, Warhammer is not real, but nevertheless, the community at large exists because of their love of that universe. By doing this, you're taking something that people love and saying, well, we don't like how it is, so now we're gonna change it. And like always, when you give activists a few yards, they'll end up taking the entire field, which in this case is literally what is happening. Activists looked at Warhammer and went, what's one of the most popular factions? Custodes? Cool. Why are they all men? Let's put some women in there. Then obviously Games Workshop did nothing to stop these activists, so they naturally decided, well, if they're not going to stop us, we should just keep going. And now the first custody allegedly is now a woman. Funny how that works, doesn't it? Games Workshop famously, before, demanded that all the lore be represented when it comes to the actual miniatures and sets that they sold to customers. But it seems that these days this matters little, and now anything or everything can be changed on a whim, like I joked a few months back. It's only a matter of time before female space marines or the Emperor of Mankind turns trans or a woman. It's not a matter of if, but when at this point. This Warhammer story, which I'll cover even later in this video, it also coincides with another story recently that I was reading about that kind of echoes this whole sentiment of making stuff for modern audiences. This one comes from Bounding Into Comics. Embracer Group says they want to use AI to help avoid bias in game design. This was detailed in Embracer Group's annual report for fiscal years 2023 and 4. In this report, they detail exactly what this AI is meant to do. They said, create more engaging and immersive experiences that provide each player with a unique, dynamic, and personalized experience. We also see great opportunities for AI in game development, speed, logistics, and planning. Then there's Thomas Hedman, who's the head of privacy and AI for Embracer Group as a whole, and he clarified what this AI bias thing meant. He said, AI is trained on historical data which tilts in a certain direction. As a result, you can end up with imbalanced automated decision making. Let's say you're building a village. If you use AI for this, depending on how it's trained and the decisions that it takes, you may end up with a village that displays some sort of imbalance. What Thomas Hedman is saying is that Embracer Group wants to use AI to do things like populate in-game villages and towns to make it easier for developers. However, because AI uses historical data, this could lead to an imbalance of representation. That's the key here. What he really means is that since AI isn't biased like many woke activists working in gaming are right now, that if they used AI, it might make a medieval village be full of white European people. Because historically, during the Middle Ages, that's how Europe would largely look like during that time. However, that is of course racist because having a setting like a fantasy medieval one showcase European white people is not diverse enough. Therefore, Embracer is working to change the bias, as they call it, which what they really mean is train AI to see the world through a woke activist's eyes instead. This ties into Warhammer and other examples that I'll give, which is that the world we live in right now, from the entertainment and more, it is being culturally and systematically revised into fitting new agendas. And if the old ways, which are arguably accurate in terms of demographics or even history, take the Adeptus Custodes being male only, that is now a problem. Instead, you have female Custodes now. Also, the very first one, even if they're not named, is also a female because why not? Wouldn't that be great if a seemingly all-male faction was actually not that at all? And instead it was also shepherded and led by a woman instead? Bonus points if she's diverse, also probably gay too because, ESG and all of that. So what you're witnessing these days, in many parts, is the revisionism of both cultural, lore, and societal structures to find new woke ideals, and nothing is the better for it. Embracer, after all, has laid off plenty of people this year already, almost 100 back in January 2024, and they cancelled the next Deus Ex game as well. Then they also laid off almost 1,400 people again in February, which, by the way, that equates to around 8% of Embracer's entire workforce being let go. They say it's to restructure and make the business more profitable and streamlined, but if you ask me, it's clear that their decisions are not equating to good games being made or selling well. Need I remind you, last year Embracer laid off and permanently shut down Volition after the Saints Row remake bombed completely. But that game was a DEI woke activist's wet dream, a whole host of diverse characters who coincidentally are shooting white people in the debut trailer. But the fans said no, it wasn't the Saints Row they wanted, and voila, the game failed and now the studio is gone. I even got sent the game for free, by the way, when it came out by Embracer, and I still haven't played it. I have no desire to play woke slop like this ever, and clearly, neither do paying customers. And it's not like people are just against diversity in general, since it has worked in the past. Look at this article from Wargamer that proves my point, and it's titled, Warhammer 40K's LGBTQ representation works because it's boring. This proves exactly my point, that LGBT representation can work in just about anything, it just matters on how you implement it into the work. Warhammer has always had this kind of representation. They even state in the article characters like Inquisitor Waynant from the book series The Beast Arises. A character that is a badass warrior that also just happens to be gay, but that doesn't define their character, nor should it. The reason why such representation works is because the gay character in question is viewed as a living human being who is far more than just their sexuality. These days, a gay character must tell you they're gay, have a flamboyant voice, or have some sort of physical visual cue to their body somewhere to signify to the viewer that they are gay. Maybe a bright colored haircut, a rainbow pin on their jacket, there needs to be something. Wargamer even dismantles the argument that there must be more LGBT representation for Warhammer in their own article where they say this. That said, it doesn't mean they don't exist. In fact, for such a grim setting, 40K does LGBTQ+ representation surprisingly well by having brilliant characters whose queerness is incidental. That last word there is pivotal to all of this. The LGBTQ+ representation is good because it is incidental. It's not the focus of the story or anything, it just happens to be there. I've talked to and interacted with gay people pretty much all of my life. I know they exist. Like, I have a friend that I send memes to and talk to daily, and he is the gayest man alive. But he's more than the fact that he's gay. He's a human being. The thing that companies don't seem to understand is that you're placing gay people into a box by representing them in these overtly outlandish and downright cartoonish ways. Rainbow flags everywhere, kissing all the time. Why can't you just make a good character first? Then if they're gay, they're gay. Maybe it ties back to that Embracer bias of their AI, but I think gay people can act just as normal as anybody else. Unfortunately, too many things these days do the exact opposite, and instead being gay or whatever else is the focal point instead of the actual story or characters. Like I said, Wargamer kinda dismantled their whole argument for gay representation with the title of the article, and it's true. Warhammer's LGBTQ+ representation worked at the time anyways. By the way, this article is a year old, but that's why I'm sharing it here on purpose. Because I want to show you how these concepts and ideas existed within Warhammer then compared to now. Then it was incidental, it was not in your face, it was just a part of some characters and that's it. Now the goalposts have shifted and the changes are more direct and apparent, like female custodies for example. The key to good representation is not to make it feel like it's being placed there on purpose in order to check boxes. When someone asks you how do you want a story to present a gay character, tell them to look at straight characters in any work and say, like that. Game of Thrones for example, Jon Snow is a straight guy. We know because he sleeps with women, obviously. But we never needed Jon to stare directly into the camera and say, hey, did you know I'm straight? Because I'm straight, guys. Him being straight, it felt natural and it made sense in the story. That's what a gay character needs to be. They don't need to have pink hair, a septum piercing with Black Lives Matter on their jean jacket with a trans pin for all to see. That feels forced, it feels inauthentic, and yet again, just using gay characters to prop up agendas instead of allowing a character to just be who they are. When it comes to Warhammer, what matters the most is authenticity and to maintain the allure of the grim dark fantasy setting above all else. The characters within these stories are almost not as important as the overall grand picture of what they're actually living through. Plus, let's be honest guys, Warhammer 40K's universe is pretty much a reversed, science fiction-esque modern world. Humanity within Warhammer went from being religious medieval peasants to modern society happening. Then eventually, thousands of years into the future, hence the 40K in the name, humanity ultimately reverted back to an almost religious-like zealot state of society again. Sure, humanity could travel the cosmos and all that, but I think what Warhammer, at least from the human side anyways, proved is that a common united ideology was needed to bring all of humanity into a singular, uninterrupted group. Not necessarily because they wanted to, but because they had to due to the existence of otherworldly threats. It's sort of like how I always imagined if aliens were to just suddenly land on Earth, right? That would immediately become the most prominent moment in human history for all of us living today. It would obviously confirm that we're not alone, life outside exists and all of that, but it would also make whatever trivial differences or whatnot you or I talk about suddenly just fade away as if they never mattered anymore. It would no longer be you are American, I am Canadian, this person is from Russia, and that guy over there is from Argentina. In the face of an alien threat, we would all collectively agree that we are humanity, and that's it. And that's how I always looked at Warhammer's world, and that the society the Emperor of Mankind has fostered is kind of in a way a hyper-futuristic form of what I can only call uber religion, pretty much. Not only the fact you have characters referred to in terms like Inquisitors, but even the way the armor looks for many of these factions echoes that medieval European knight aesthetic. And frankly, in the wake of humanity discovering that there's this crazy threat out there called the Warp, it would make sense for humanity to become unified under one banner in order to fight back. And that simplicity amongst the chaos is what makes Warhammer captivating, but sadly when it comes to our time today in this world, the activists are not being respectful of Warhammer's lore or concepts. And instead they are injecting their real-world politics into a setting that is thousands of years in the future that would not acknowledge these ideas. In Warhammer, if some character told another, hey, I'm gay and these are my pronouns, they would just look at them and say, I don't care. The Warp is going to kill us all, so stay vigilant and shut up. And I think with the whole female custodies nonsense, it's changing the mystique of a massive faction and in turn ruining the allure of the stories by doing so. And there are people out there who will never stop to ruin what we love to fit agendas. This moves us to the next big story here, which comes from Fandom Pulse, and it's titled, Blackstone bought a major manga producing company and Japanese comic fans should be scared their culture will go the way of Marvel and DC. If you're unaware somehow, anime and manga are dominating everything. American comics and such cannot even compare in terms of popularity and business. This has largely been because Americanized comics have embraced wokeness and Japan has mostly ignored it instead. Now, that might not be the case anymore. So Blackstone is a big private investor firm founded and operated in New York City. They handle over $1.1 trillion in assets, which is so much money I can barely fathom how much that even is. Also, by the way, Blackstone and BlackRock, they're two different investment firm companies. I know, confusing, but I figured I set that up for you. Anyways, Blackstone has bought Infocom pretty much for a whopping $1.7 billion, and now they own a manga publisher within Japan that deals with content largely positioned towards women in the late 20s to 40s with disposable income. Most of this Infocom company's profits come from Mecha Comic, which is a site that features many different mangas that are all varying degrees of romantic-centric stories. Blackstone's goal here is to buy their way into the Japanese manga market and then just spread their influence over time. And when it comes to these mega investment groups, that means exactly what you think it does, dear viewer. That the armor of Japanese manga has been penetrated, and now this Mecha Comic site and the many mangas that they own could implement DEI agenda pushing and woke identity politics in the future. Companies like this have so much money they could easily influence what they want into happening. If the entirety of the Western landscape pretty much has bowed to the woke agenda, it only makes sense that they would now finally target Japan. Thankfully, they don't own Shonen Jump or anything, well, yet I guess. But this story kind of just circles all the way back to everything else that I've been talking about here today, which is that activists will find a way to corrupt and destroy everything you love and hold dear by turning it into something completely unrecognizable over time. Warhammer was too male-centric, too based, and not woke enough. Now your custodians are women, and the first one is apparently likely a woman too. Just look at nonsense like American comics. How many characters now are just suddenly gay out of nowhere? Pretty much all of them. How is that not screaming agenda at you? It's only a matter of time before Marvel turns Peter Parker gay for Harry Osborn or something, and at this point, nothing would really surprise me. Even Ubisoft recently stated that they want to modernize their previous Assassin's Creed games. Some would think, well, that just means controls and then making the graphics better, but come on guys, this is Ubisoft, the birthplace of Sweet Baby Inc. There's no way they don't find a way to ruin and uglify everything in these remakes somehow. Would I love a remake of Assassin's Creed 1 or 2? Absolutely. Do I think Ubisoft will do it faithfully without ruining it? Absolutely not. The sad reality is that I genuinely don't believe most, if not all, westernized companies and developers are even capable of creating anything that isn't filled with this kind of stuff anymore. The simple reason being is that many up-and-coming game developers are taught these very woke things from an entry level. So from the get-go, as more and more people get into game dev, the likelihood, in the West anyway, is that these new hires that will eventually work at these westernized studios have been conditioned to believe that this way of making games and injecting DEI is not really an option, it is simply the new normal now. Which is why whenever you hear a company say we're making this for the modern audience, that's political talk for we're going over everything with a fine comb and picking out anything that would offend people who were raised with victimhood mindsets. Assassin's Creed, at least the first one anyway, likely can't be modern audience that hard. Mostly because it's set in the Middle East, and I doubt Ubisoft has the balls to actually mess with that corner of the world and its concepts. It's likely why Assassin's Creed Mirage anyways felt devoid of woke identity politics, and that wasn't by accident also. Think about it, Mirage is set within Baghdad, so naturally the Muslim religion reigns there. So if you played Mirage like I did, you noticed how a lot of the DEI wokeness Ubisoft is known for was suspiciously absent for the most part. This is simply because Ubisoft knows they can't step on the toes of the Muslim religion or its people. However, this also shows the dichotomy of these studios since Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is set in Japan, is so far away from what fans actually want from the series. I mean, a black samurai is playable. Apparently, both Yasuke and Naoe can be in romantic relationships with anyone regardless of gender. And I guarantee you there will be non-binary and such people within this setting, which by the way is feudal Japan. One of the least likely places in the world, especially during that time where this sort of thing would exist. While I do agree with Grums when he says don't buy games from these companies for 2 years and then they'll be forced to change, the cynical part of my brain does come back and think, well, even if they lay off these woke developers, if the new hires are being trained this way, wouldn't that mean even if they were forced to make non-DEI stuff, they wouldn't really know how to approach it anyway? since all they know really is identity politics, so are games screwed forever then? I wouldn't go that far, yet anyway. There are bright spots, but the ever-looming shadow that is the agenda is always present and it wants to consume everything. And it's up to all of us to keep saying no, no matter what. And in terms of Warhammer, I'm telling you guys, it's only a matter of time before a Space Marine takes his helmet off and it's a lesbian, half-shaven haircut, septum ring, thin eyebrow monstrosity who has a gap in their front tooth and a body like a cafeteria lunch lady. I know people are hyped for Space Marine 2, but man, my cynical brain is telling me there's gonna be female Space Marines in there somehow. I just know it. Or they'll just cloak and dagger it with the online multiplayer mode by offering body type A or B options, which is just stealthily introducing female Space Marines also. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but the future is looking bleak, my friends. Not a very uplifting video, I know. I'll try to find more positive news for a future video. But what do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments as always. Can Warhammer, Assassin's Creed, manga, and everything else be saved, or are we cooked? Like, subscribe, share, and have a wonderful day. Thanks to all of my patrons, and I'll see you soon.